They told me I was blessed. That word hung in the air like smoke as I stood in a borrowed dress, gold bracelets heavy on my trembling wrists. The music pounded through the crowded house. Everyone smiled at me like I'd won a prize. I was 18 years old, raised on cracked floors and empty dinner plates. That morning, they handed me to a man who could have been my grandfather. My mother called it our salvation. He arrived in shiny black cars, wearing expensive cologne that made my stomach turn. When his hand touched my shoulder, I wanted to run. But Mama squeezed my fingers tight, a silent warning. Papa wouldn't look at me. Years of poverty had taught them both to look away from uncomfortable truths. "Be strong," my aunt whispered close to my ear. "This is how girls like us survive." The vows blurred together in my head. I remember the ring, cold and too tight on my finger. I remember his smile that never touched his eyes. I remember thinking that paradise shouldn't feel like being locked in a cage. That night, when the door clicked shut behind us, the sound burned itself into my memory. By morning, I understood the truth nobody dared speak out loud. I hadn't been married. I'd been sold. His house was huge but felt like a prison. Tall concrete walls surrounded everything, topped with sharp broken glass. The gates locked automatically with a beep. Inside, marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Silk curtains hung from every window. But none of it was mine. I was just another pretty object placed carefully on display. He loved control more than he could ever love a person. He decided when I ate, when I slept, when I could speak. If I cried, he reminded me how easily he could send me back to nothing. His words came out soft and gentle, but his actions told a different story. Every single day taught me new ways that fear could hide itself. I tried calling home once, my hands shaking as I dialed. Mama listened to everything I said, then sighed deeply. "Men like him don't leave poor girls," she told me in a tired voice. "Just be patient. Money changes everything eventually." But it didn't change anything. The first time he hit me, he brought expensive gifts the next day. The second time he said it was my fault. By the third time he didn't bother explaining anymore. I started measuring time by watching bruises fade and come back again. I stared out the tall windows often, imagining myself running away. But there were metal bars hidden behind those beautiful curtains. Even the air in that house felt owned by someone else. The sickness started in the mornings. Then came the dizziness that wouldn't stop. A doctor who wouldn't meet my eyes confirmed what I already knew deep down. I was pregnant. I expected him to explode with anger. Instead, he smiled wide. A baby, he said, would make sure I never left him. The hitting didn't stop when I got pregnant. Got worse. Every argument ended with me on the floor. Every time I begged him to stop, he reminded me how much money my family owed him. When I finally ran back to my parents' house, shaking and covered in bruises, they barely let me finish talking. "If you leave him," Papa said slowly, staring at the ground, "we lose everything we have." So I went back to that terrible house. By the time I was 3 months pregnant, my body felt like a battlefield. One night, his anger exploded beyond anything before. I remember the cold floor against my face, blood in my mouth, my ears ringing so loud. I remember curling around my stomach, thinking this was how my story would end. But it wasn't the end. When he finally fell asleep, I ran. No shoes. Barely dressed. Bleeding. Pregnant. Hello everyone, and thank you for being here. Before the story continues, take a second to tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Here we share true-to-life revenge stories where the ignored, humiliated, and betrayed rise quietly, and make it count. I truly enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and hearing from you directly. One important note: some elements in this story have been fictionalized for educational and storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to real people or settings is coincidental. That being said, the message I'm sharing is meaningful, and I hope it speaks to you. I knocked on my parents' door just before sunrise. Mama opened it, looked at me standing there, then slowly shook her head. "You made your choice already," she said quietly. The door closed in my face. That moment taught me the hardest truth. I was completely alone. I walked until my legs couldn't carry me anymore. The night air froze my skin. I had nowhere to go and no one to call. When I found the auto repair shop, old cars sat in neat rows like sleeping animals. I climbed into one and curled up on the back seat, my whole body shaking. I slept like someone who'd died. Voices woke me when the sun came up. Shouting. Footsteps getting closer. Car door opening suddenly. Workers found me there. Dirty, shaking, very pregnant. Someone called their boss over. He wasn't a rich man. His hands were stained with black oil. His clothes smelled like metal and hard work. But when he looked at me, I didn't see hunger or judgment in his eyes. Just honest concern. I told him everything that had happened to me. He didn't interrupt once. He didn't try to touch me. When I finished talking, he simply said, "You're safe here now." Weeks went by. Then months. He found me a small room to sleep in. Made sure I ate real food. Took me to doctors for checkups. Never once crossed any line. He treated me like a real human being, something I'd almost forgotten I was. One day, he offered to drive me back to see my family. They slammed the door in both our faces. They called me ungrateful and worthless. Called him a nobody. Said my husband had already paid good money for my silence. We didn't fall in love like movies show it. Happened slowly, quietly. In shared meals and late-night conversations. In the way his voice never got loud and angry. In how he talked to my unborn baby like a precious promise instead of a burden to carry. When he asked me to marry him, there were no fancy diamonds or pressure. Just respect. My old community laughed at us. My family announced publicly they were done with me forever. People said I'd traded wealth and comfort for engine grease and broken dreams. They booed us out of town like we were criminals. We left with almost nothing in our pockets. My baby arrived healthy and crying. Our apartment was tiny. The repair shop grew slowly, one customer at a time. He worked 16-hour days without complaining. I learned to manage the money, handle the books, talk to suppliers. Every coin we earned mattered. Years passed like water flowing. One shop became 3 shops. 3 became a real company. The company spread across borders into new countries. Official papers were signed. We opened factories. Our marriage finally got registered in court. Quietly, proudly, legally. We had more children who filled our lives with noise and joy. We bought bigger houses. We found real peace. One day, while on vacation in Los Angeles, fate decided to blink. I saw my older sister across the street, staring at me like she'd seen a ghost walking. She thought I was still broken and struggling. She had no idea what was waiting behind my front door. Los Angeles makes people feel either very small or very important. I was crossing a quiet street with my children when I heard someone say my name the old way, sharp and dismissive. I turned around and saw my older sister, standing frozen by a bus stop. Her eyes scanned my expensive clothes, my confident posture, my whole life. She smiled the kind of smile people use when they pity you. "What are you doing here?" she asked, confused. "Are you working for somebody rich?" She looked around like she expected my employer to appear and claim me. I answered her politely and calmly. "Always do." She laughed and shook her head in disbelief. Said she never imagined I'd make it this far away from home. "Maybe I was lucky enough to be a nanny for some wealthy family," she suggested loudly. She spoke with total confidence, not realizing how much she was revealing about herself. I didn't correct any of her assumptions. Instead, I invited her to visit my home. The invitation confused her completely. She hesitated, clearly suspicious, but curiosity won over pride. During the car ride, she asked so many questions. Who I worked for, how I'd survived all these years, whether my life was still difficult and hard. I smiled through every single question she asked. Some truths taste sweeter when you delay them. As the security gates opened and my mansion came into view, she leaned forward slowly in her seat. "This place," she whispered, barely breathing. "Who owns this house?" I parked the car carefully and said absolutely nothing. The silence hit my sister first. She stepped through the front door and stopped talking completely. Her eyes traced the marble floors, the high ceilings, the sunlight pouring through massive glass walls. Every step she took seemed slower, like reality was rebuilding itself around her. She complimented the beautiful decorations. Asked again who I worked for. I offered her cold water from the kitchen. She refused it. Sat very stiffly on the edge of a sofa that cost more than our entire childhood house. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't notice. She followed me through room after room, still assuming she was touring someone else's success story. She praised the taste, the space, the expensive art on the walls. She asked if the owners treated me kindly. They do, I told her honestly. They've given me absolutely everything. That answer satisfied her, but only for a moment. Then we walked into the dining area together. That's where the huge portrait hung on the wall. Large, perfectly framed, impossible to miss. Family frozen in pure happiness. Her eyes landed on it and refused to move anywhere else. She stepped closer, squinted hard. Her breath caught in her throat. The woman in that photo stood tall, calm, and absolutely radiant. A strong man beside her, steady and proud. Children gathered all around them, smiling without any fear. She turned to face me very slowly. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Is that you? I nodded, still smiling gently. That's my husband. The one your family rejected. And those are my children. This house. It belongs to us. The room seemed to tilt sideways. She dropped to her knees. Her pride collapsed loudly and messily. She cried the way people do when their old mistakes suddenly have faces and addresses. She begged me, apologized over and over, reached for my hands like they were ropes keeping her from drowning. I didn't know, she kept repeating. I just listened. That was all I gave her. She called our parents that same night, frantic and talking fast. She described everything she'd seen in my house. She told them exactly where I was, who I'd become, what they'd lost by abandoning me. The phone line stayed completely quiet for a long time. Then regret finally arrived. Heavy, desperate, and very inconvenient. Messages started coming after that. Phone calls. Desperate pleas. They talked about forgiveness like it was a right they deserved, not something they had to request. They reminded me about blood and family duty. They rewrote our past in softer, gentler words. I looked out at my children playing freely in the garden. I remembered locked gates, closed doors, heavy silence. Forgiveness is a powerful thing. But so is memory. I told my sister she could rest in one of the guest rooms. She slept in a bedroom bigger than our entire childhood home. In the morning she cried again, asking if I would agree to see our parents. I said I would think about it carefully. That answer broke her more than a direct refusal would have. Because hope that arrives too late becomes the heaviest burden anyone can carry. It weighs more than anger ever could. They showed up at my gate months later. Older now. Smaller somehow. Visibly nervous. My parents stood there like visitors to a life they didn't recognize anymore. Time had bent their backs but sharpened their fear. They stared at my house the same way they used to stare at other people's wealth, with pure longing. I met them outside by the front gate. They started weeping immediately. They spoke about mistakes they'd made, about survival, about choices forced on them by poverty and pressure. They said they'd only done what they thought was best at the time, that being poor had forced their hands. I believed them when they said this. But believing someone doesn't erase the consequences of their actions. Mama reached toward my stomach out of old habit, then stopped suddenly. She remembered how she'd once closed a door on me while I carried life inside my body. Papa still couldn't look directly at my eyes. They asked for reconciliation, for a place in my current life, in my children's lives too. I listened to everything they said. Then I finally spoke my truth. I told them how love from a stranger had saved me when family wouldn't. How kindness from someone they rejected had rebuilt what blood had broken apart. I explained that success wasn't revenge, but it had definitely revealed the truth. They had chosen their own comfort over my safety. I had chosen survival over their approval. I forgave them for everything. But forgiveness didn't automatically come with access to my life. Some doors, once slammed shut on you, are never meant to fully reopen. They left my property quietly, and peace returned when they were gone. People always think victory looks loud and dramatic. Doesn't work that way. Real victory is waking up without fear crawling under your skin. It's raising children who don't flinch when voices get raised. It's finding love that doesn't demand pain as proof of loyalty. I built my entire life brick by brick with a man the whole world dismissed as worthless. Together we turned rejection into determination, scarcity into smart strategy, and basic survival into lasting legacy. The wealth came much later. The peace came first. Sometimes my story travels back to the place I came from. People whisper my name differently now than before. With awe. With regret. With lessons learned far too late. I don't return to that place anymore. Not because I'm bitter, but because I learned something important. Where you bloom matters more than where you were planted. I was traded once like property. That will never happen again. Some people think my story is about revenge. It isn't. It's about refusing to disappear when the world expected me to vanish quietly. It's about choosing myself when nobody else would choose me. It's about building something so solid that even painful memories can't tear it down. My children will never know locked gates or forced smiles. They'll never understand fear disguised as love. They'll grow up knowing that home means safety, that family means protection, that love should never ever hurt. That knowledge is my greatest victory. That's the legacy I'm leaving behind. And that ending, nobody can ever take it away from me. News travels faster when pride gets involved. I heard about my first husband's downfall from a business associate who didn't know our history. He mentioned it casually over coffee. An aging businessman whose empire was crumbling under lawsuits, bad decisions, and younger competitors circling like hungry vultures. The name hit me hard. The man who once decided my worth now fought to keep his name out of courtrooms. His businesses were failing. His allies had abandoned him. Money, I learned, is only loyal when you keep feeding it. He tried reaching out to me. Letters arrived through lawyers and intermediaries. Polite at first, almost respectful. Then demanding and angry. He wanted to see the child I'd been pregnant with. Claimed he had rights. Claimed he felt regret. Claimed ownership disguised as apology. I never wrote back once. Not because I was afraid of him anymore, but because I had clarity now. Power had shifted the moment I walked barefoot into that dark night and refused to return. He'd mistaken my silence for weakness and submission. He never understood that survival is actually the most dangerous form of defiance. When his final message arrived, angry, desperate, stripped of all dignity, I read it once and burned it. Some chapters in life don't deserve closure or explanations. They deserve distance. They deserve to be left behind completely. I thought about that young girl I used to be. Terrified. Traded away. I wished I could tell her this simple truth. You will survive him. You will outlast him. You will build something he could never destroy. But life doesn't let us rewrite our pasts. It only lets us choose our outcomes. And I chose well. Success attracts curious people. Journalists wanted to interview me about our company. Business magazines wanted my story. How a small repair shop became international. They praised my strategy, my discipline, my vision for growth. They asked about mentors, education, luck, and connections. I talked only about hard work. I never mentioned the forced marriage. The bruises that covered my body. The nights I spent homeless and afraid. Not because I felt ashamed, but because my trauma isn't something I sell for publicity. Still, whispers started spreading anyway. People from my past recognized me in magazines and on television. Old neighbors. Distant relatives I barely remembered. Strangers who'd once watched me get handed away like a business transaction. Some apologized publicly on social media. Some denied knowing anything about it. The loudest voices belonged to people who'd benefited most from my silence back then. I watched it all from a distance, completely unmoved. The world didn't need every detail to understand the lesson. A woman doesn't need to explain why she escaped from hell. The fact that she survived is explanation enough. My children saw none of this drama. I made sure of that. They grew up knowing only love and safety and encouragement. They'll never carry the weight I once carried. That protection, that shield I built around them, is my greatest achievement. Greater than money. Greater than business success. Greater than any revenge I could have planned. I gave them the childhood I never had. And that matters more than anything else ever could. My sister stayed in contact over the years. She changed slowly but genuinely. She stopped asking for money or favors. Started asking about my life with real care, not entitlement or jealousy. Growth is possible, I learned. But it's also rare. She asked me once if I'd ever come back home to visit. I thought about her question much longer than she expected. Home isn't about geography or location. It's about safety. It's about dignity. It's about being seen as a person, not priced as an object. The place I came from had refused to give me all three. I told her maybe someday I'd visit. But not now. Not yet. Because healing doesn't require you to revisit every wound that shaped you. Some scars deserve sunlight and attention. Others deserve rest and distance. She understood what I meant. That understanding mattered more than any apology ever could. It showed me she'd actually grown. We talk on the phone sometimes now. She tells me about her children. I tell her about mine. We don't talk about the past very much. There's no need to keep picking at old wounds. We're building something new instead. Something honest. It'll never be the relationship we might have had if things were different. But it's real. And real matters more than perfect. I've learned that some relationships can't be fully repaired. But they can find peace anyway. They can reach a place of acceptance and distance and quiet respect. That's enough. Has to be enough. Because carrying anger forever only punishes the person holding it. I chose to put that weight down years ago. My children know nothing about locked gates or forced marriages. They understand love as something consistent and steady. They know discipline without fear attached to it. They know that home is where voices stay gentle and mistakes get met with patience, not punishment. Sometimes I watch them playing together and feel time fold in on itself strangely. I think about the girl I used to be. 18 years old. Afraid of everything. Traded away like livestock. I wish I could reach back through time and tell her something important. You will laugh again someday. You will be loved without pain mixed in. You will build something so strong that even terrible memories can't destroy it. But life doesn't allow those kinds of rewrites. It only allows outcomes. And my outcome was earned through blood and tears and endless determination. My oldest child asked me once how our company started. I told the truth, softened for their age but honest. I talked about struggle, about hard choices, about refusing to accept a future written by other people's fear and greed. They listened carefully to every word. Then my child said something that stopped my heart. So you built all this because you didn't give up? I smiled at that simple understanding. No, I replied gently. I built this because I chose myself when nobody else would choose me. I decided I mattered even when the world said I didn't. That night I finally understood what legacy really means. It isn't money in bank accounts. It isn't property or businesses. Legacy is permission. Permission to live differently than those who came before you. Permission to break cycles. Permission to choose yourself. That's what I'm leaving my children. That's the inheritance that actually matters. People always expect revenge to look dramatic and violent. Mine didn't look like that at all. I didn't confront anyone publicly. I didn't expose secrets. I didn't deliberately destroy anyone's life or reputation. I simply refused to disappear quietly. And that refusal was enough. The man who broke my body and spirit lost everything while chasing control over others. The family who traded me away lost all access to the life they thought they deserved. The community that booed me out of town gained a lesson they'll whisper to their daughters for generations. And I gained something more valuable than any of that. Gained peace. Not because the past apologized to me, but because I outgrew it completely. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is becoming living proof that survival was never your final chapter. It was only your beginning. I didn't need them to suffer. I just needed them to see. To understand what they'd thrown away. To realize that the girl they thought was worthless had more strength in her broken pieces than they had in all their comfortable choices. That realization, that moment when they understood, was sweeter than any public confrontation could ever be. I didn't have to say a word. My life spoke louder than any speech I could have given. My success screamed the truth they tried to bury. And that was enough revenge for me. More than enough. I chose peace over anger. Progress over punishment. Future over past. Those choices didn't make me weak. They made me free. The news about his final collapse broke quietly. No dramatic headlines. No sympathy pieces in major papers. Just a short business report buried beneath market updates. Assets seized by creditors, properties sold off, investigations ongoing and expanding. The man who once controlled rooms through fear had been reduced to a small cautionary footnote. I read about it alone in my office. There was no satisfaction in seeing it, only confirmation of something I already knew. Power built on cruelty always collapses inward eventually. It consumes itself when there's nothing left to dominate or destroy. Later that same week, I attended an international conference held in one of our company's newest properties. As I walked past polished glass and corporate logos, I realized something strange. I no longer felt connected to my past pain. It had finally lost its grip on me. Somewhere along this journey, basic survival had transformed into complete sovereignty. I wasn't the scared girl anymore. I wasn't even the survivor fighting to prove something. I was simply myself, whole, powerful, free. That transformation didn't happen overnight. Took years of choosing myself over and over. Years of building instead of breaking. Years of focusing forward instead of looking back. But it happened. And now, standing in a building my company owned, I understood the full distance I'd traveled. From a girl with no choices to a woman who created them. From someone traded away to someone who couldn't be bought at any price. Past no longer defined me. It had simply prepared me. And that made all the difference in the world. It happened in an airport lounge completely by chance. I noticed him because he was staring directly at me. Older now. Smaller somehow. Stripped of the arrogance that once filled entire rooms. He stood up slowly when he recognized my face. Uncertainty flickered across his features like a dying candle. He didn't speak first. Neither did I immediately. We existed in the same expensive space for less than 1 minute. Two strangers bound together by a history that no longer defined who I was. Then my boarding call echoed through the speakers. I turned away from him without saying anything. That was our confrontation. That was the ending he never expected to get. No screaming. No accusations. No tears or drama. Just indifference. The kind that tells someone they don't matter anymore. I boarded my first-class flight. He stayed behind. And I never looked back to see if he was still watching. Some people think closure requires conversation. Doesn't. Sometimes closure is realizing that someone who once controlled your entire world now can't even make you pause. That feeling of complete indifference was more powerful than any words I could have spoken. He expected me to still be afraid of him. Or angry. Or broken. Instead, I was simply done. He was a chapter I'd finished reading years ago. A lesson I'd already learned and moved past. Nothing more. Nothing less. Just a stranger in an airport who used to matter once. The flight attendant asked if I wanted champagne. Said yes. I toasted silently to the girl who survived. To the woman who thrived. To the future that belonged only to me. One quiet evening, my oldest child asked how our company first began. I decided to tell them the truth. Softened and age-appropriate, but honest. I spoke about struggle and poverty. About hard choices nobody should have to make. About refusing to accept a future written by other people's fear and desperation. They listened more carefully than I expected. Their young face serious and thoughtful. Then my child said something that made my heart skip. "So you built all this because you didn't give up when things got hard?" I smiled at that simple summary. "No," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "I built this because I chose myself when absolutely nobody else would. I decided I mattered even when the world kept saying I didn't." My child nodded slowly, understanding more than I thought possible. "That's brave," they said quietly. Pulled them close. "Someday you might have to choose yourself too. Remember that it's always okay. Even if other people don't understand. Even if they get angry. Your life belongs to you." That night, after tucking everyone into bed, I understood legacy in a new way. It isn't money sitting in accounts. It isn't buildings or businesses or material things. Legacy is permission. Permission to live differently than generations before you. Permission to break terrible cycles. Permission to choose yourself without guilt. That conversation gave my child something more valuable than inheritance. It gave them the knowledge that they're worth fighting for. That their voice matters. That they never have to shrink themselves to make others comfortable. And that truth will protect them better than any fortune ever could. I wrote a letter to my younger self once. I never mailed it anywhere or showed it to another person. It sits in a locked drawer, the paper yellowing with time and age. The letter says this: "They will doubt you completely. They will trade you like property. They will close doors in your face and call it destiny or tradition. Walk forward anyway. You are not weak for surviving terrible things. You are not broken for leaving when staying would have killed you. One day, your peace will absolutely terrify the people who needed you to stay small and quiet." I don't read that letter very often anymore. I don't actually need to read it. I live those words every single day now. They've become part of who I am. The girl I was writing to, scared, abandoned, pregnant, alone, she survived. More than survived. She built an empire from nothing. She raised children in love instead of fear. She proved that being traded away wasn't an ending. It was a beginning nobody expected. Sometimes late at night, I think about all the girls still trapped in situations like mine was. Forced into marriages. Treated like solutions to family debt. Told that suffering is their duty. I hope my story reaches them somehow. I hope they see that escape is possible. That survival is possible. That building a completely different life is possible. Not easy. Never easy. But absolutely possible. You don't have to accept the future other people write for you. You can write your own. One brave choice at a time. One step forward. One refusal to give up. That's how you survive. That's how you win. Freedom isn't loud like people imagine. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or fireworks. Real freedom is waking up without having to rehearse your courage before getting out of bed. It's laughing without checking who's watching first. It's love that doesn't hurt to prove itself real. I found freedom in a place nobody expected, with a man the whole world overlooked and dismissed. In a life built slowly and honestly, without anyone's permission. The girl who was once exchanged for her family's comfort now owns her name, her choices, her entire future. And that outcome, more than wealth, more than forgiveness, more than revenge, is the ending I earned through blood and determination. People ask me sometimes if I'm happy now. The question always surprises me. Happy feels too small for what I've built. I'm peaceful. I'm free. I'm surrounded by people who love me without conditions attached. I wake up in a home where I'm safe. My children grow up knowing protection. My husband treats me like an equal partner. That's not just happiness. That's victory. Complete and total victory. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself because it simply exists. Some nights I stand in my garden and look at the stars. I think about the girl who slept in a car, terrified and alone. I wish I could tell her that everything turns out better than she could possibly imagine. That the pain has purpose. That the struggle leads somewhere beautiful. But she couldn't have believed me anyway. She had to walk the path herself. Had to survive each day. Had to choose herself over and over until it became natural. And she did. We did. And now we're free. I heard my name spoken in my hometown years after I stopped belonging there. Not shouted across streets. Not mocked by laughing crowds. Whispered. It traveled back to me through distant relatives and old acquaintances who suddenly remembered me with strange pride. They talked about my success like it was somehow communal. Like my escape had been a group effort instead of something I did completely alone. It hadn't been their effort at all. The same streets that once watched me get traded away now claimed inspiration from my story. Mothers started warning their daughters differently. Fathers began hesitating before making deals disguised as tradition or culture. Change came slowly to that place. But it came. And it came specifically because I survived long enough to prove something important. Obedience was never the only option available. Suffering wasn't actually destiny. Young girls had choices even when the whole world said they didn't. I'll never return to live in that town. But knowing my story changed things there brings me quiet satisfaction. Not because I wanted revenge on a community. But because maybe, just maybe, some young girl won't have to suffer what I suffered. Maybe some father will pause before signing away his daughter's future. Maybe some mother will fight harder to protect instead of surrender. That possibility makes everything I went through matter differently. My pain wasn't wasted. It became a warning. Lesson. A roadmap for others trying to find their way out. And if my story saves even one girl from what I experienced, then every terrible moment was worth surviving. Every tear had purpose. Every scar tells a story that needed telling. My parents visited one final time. No cameras following them. No extended family members watching. Just two aging people standing at the edge of a life they didn't build and couldn't understand. This time they didn't ask for forgiveness. They asked for understanding instead. I gave them complete honesty. I told them that love without protection is just abandonment wearing a mask. That choosing survival over your own child leaves permanent echoes that never fully fade. That reconciliation doesn't always mean restoration of what was broken. They nodded slowly, accepting my words. That acceptance was enough for both of us. We parted peacefully this time. No anger. No tears. No desperate promises. Some relationships don't need repair to finally find closure. Sometimes closure is just accepting that what broke can't be fixed. And being okay with that truth. They're my parents. That biological fact never changes. But they're not my family in the way that matters. Family protects. Family fights for you. Family doesn't close doors when you're bleeding and pregnant and terrified. Have family now. Real family. Built from choice instead of blood. My husband who saved me. My children who I protect fiercely. Friends who stood by me. Business partners who respect me. That's my family. The rest are just people I used to know. People who share my history but not my present. People I've forgiven but don't need in my daily life. And that's perfectly fine. I've learned that you can forgive people and still choose distance. You can wish them well from far away. You can release anger without opening your door. Forgiveness freed me. But boundaries keep me safe. Both matter equally. My husband never asked me to thank him for saving my life. He never called himself my hero or my savior. He never reminded me of where I came from or what he rescued me from. He simply walked beside me every single day. Steadily, patiently, without fear of my complicated past. Together we built something much stronger than wealth. We built trust. Complete and total trust. He loved me without ownership attached. Protected me without controlling me. Believed in me without conditions or limits. That kind of love rewrites entire futures. I watch him with our children sometimes. Patient. Kind. Present. Everything my first husband wasn't. Everything my father couldn't be. He shows them what real strength looks like. Not dominance. Not control. But steady presence. Gentle guidance. Unconditional support. Our children will grow up with a completely different template for love. They'll know that marriage should be partnership. That men can be gentle. that strength includes kindness. Those lessons will protect them better than any amount of money. Sometimes late at night, we sit together in comfortable silence. No words needed. Just peace. Just presence. Just two people who chose each other and keep choosing each other. He knows my scars, the visible ones and the invisible ones. He's never made me feel broken because of them. Instead, he treats me like someone who survived and became stronger. Someone who turned pain into purpose. Someone worth choosing every single day. That's the greatest gift anyone ever gave me. Not rescue. Not salvation. Just being seen completely and loved anyway. That changed everything. That made everything possible. Survival taught me that real strength doesn't roar loudly. It whispers quietly. It shows up when absolutely everyone else has left. It grows in neglected places nobody's watching. It waits patiently until the world is finally ready to see it. I was never weak. I was simply waiting for my moment. Gathering strength in silence. Building foundation nobody could see yet. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing is just continuing. Just taking one more breath. Just choosing to wake up again. Small choices made repeatedly become revolution. Every morning I chose to live was an act of defiance. Every time I refused to hate myself was rebellion. Every step I took toward freedom was warfare. Nobody saw the battles I fought inside my own head. The moments I almost gave up. The nights I cried until I couldn't breathe. The days I felt too broken to continue. But I did continue. I kept choosing myself even when it felt impossible. And those small daily choices added up to transformation. To empire. To freedom. Young women sometimes ask, if this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel for more true stories like this one. Leave a comment below, telling me what you would have done in my situation. I read every single one. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your share might save someone's life. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I know this wasn't an easy story to hear, and I want to be honest with you, some of the stories that follow contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If that's not something you're comfortable with, feel free to explore other content that suits you better. But if you're willing to learn from real experiences, even painful ones, I'll be here sharing what